Okay, well, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you all for joining us today. I am Brittany Williams. I am a senior policy analyst on the higher education policy team, and I am here joined with my co-facilitator, Miss Mary Baxter, and we are here to present to you our speaker, Mrs. Aminah Elster. Mrs. Aminah is a campaign and policy coordinator with the California Coalition for Women Prisoners, where she leads its work on reproductive oppression in women's prisons. We are so excited to host this conversation with her today and talk about basic needs as well as financial assistance. I will give Mary just a quick moment to introduce herself, and then Mrs. Aminah, you can take it away. Are you having trouble unmuting? Uh-oh. Oh, I'm sorry, Mary. If you cannot, then we will go ahead. Um,
Hello?
oh, we got
Yes,
you.
for some reason I was muted. I couldn't unmute myself. But hello, my name is Mary Enoch Elizabeth Baxter, and I am an Ed Trust Justice Fellow, and here just to tag team with Brittany and share my experience as being an impacted student that had success, being a formerly incarcerated person who had to navigate that higher ed sphere. Just real quick, I'm not able to see the questions in the chat.
No worries. If we have some questions, I can see the chat. And so I guess this was a good segue. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat as you see fit. And then I will call them out to Mrs. Amina. And we can go ahead and let you take it away.
Hi, thanks, Brittany and Mary. My name is Aminah Elster. I use she, her pronouns. And as Brittany has said, I am a campaign and policy coordinator for the California Coalition for Women Prisoners. But before that, I am still also a member of the Berkeley Underground Scholars, which is a campus student organization that really fosters and supports impacted students. And I developed my relationship with the Underground Scholars during my incarceration. So I'm also formerly incarcerated student, where I earned my associates in prison and transferred over to UC Berkeley once I was released. And that's really where I started noticing the gaps in needs when it came to incarcerated students and formerly incarcerated students, but even still like equity gaps for people on parole trying to navigate higher education and not being able to really access a lot of the programs the university offers because of travel restrictions and other system impediments. And earlier, I don't know how many folks joined the workshop earlier where I spoke a little bit about basic needs, but I shared that prisons are like really not conducive for creating any kind of equity, in my opinion. And there's a number of reasons. The first being that prisons are sites of violence. I remember being a student and it's like sitting in the middle of a war zone trying to study French. Imagine how difficult that is. There's no conducive learning environment. There's not like systems in place that supports students on obtaining academic excellence. In fact, it's the other way around. It's really restrictive. There's a lot of course options, and many of the programs and classes are not transferable upon release. Because our world has moved forward fast, prisons are still stuck behind. So we're really doing a disservice to folks in reentry. Now they can't even afford to live out here, I'm from California, so California or the Bay Area more specifically. And they wasted years and years on studies that are meaningless or not transferable. But I'll stop there. But I want to hear a little bit about Mary and Mary's road to higher education and her academic excellence if possible.
Thank you for sharing that, Amina. Yeah, I mean, as someone who began that journey on the outside, it was very difficult, as a person with a criminal record, trying to find adequate employment, to help sustain myself during college. I had several bouts of homelessness. And yeah, it was just really difficult finding the support that I needed on campus, whether it was like cupboards to, meet the needs that I had for food or childcare. So I found myself taking an immense amount of student loan debt to try to offset those costs. And then once I completed my 2-year degree at Community College of Philadelphia, I had, encountered not being able to transition to a 4-year because a lot of, I was an art major, art and design major. A lot of the art schools were astronomically priced. And I was basically had to find someone to have a co-signer to take out the money needed to attend. So, I wasn't able to, complete my education on a bachelor's level. And, I've still found a way to navigate and get into my career field of choice. But for people that, aren't as lucky as I am, it was extremely difficult, to get to that 4-year degree. So it's something I'm still aspiring to. And yeah, there needs to be, that financial support so folks can, get that 4-year degree or get that master's or that doctorate. It was just really very difficult for me to obtain.
Thank you, Mary.
So I can see the chat now. I guess it's a question for Aminah or me. And they said if it fits into the convo, do we know yet how the pandemic has affected folks' access to having their basic needs met while incarcerated, or if recently released during this time, and if any of the federal COVID relief has helped at all? Thanks. And this is Philip.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to say the person's name? Sorry.
I can start. I can start. Thanks for that question. And I would just say the pandemic has further restricted access to basic needs, educational opportunities, even like family reunification because of no visiting, limited or to no access to people on the inside, having them like totally cut off from the rest of the world. And a lot of organizations having to, develop mutual aid campaigns to help support folks, through the pandemic. So I think, yeah, last year was definitely a setback for many people in their educational because the pandemic, closed off so many people, especially people in hospitals. And as far as federal COVID relief for those released during, I cannot speak to that. Anything, Mary, maybe are you familiar?
I think I can speak to not only were the parents or adults affected, the children of formerly incarcerated and incarcerated people were affected just as well. I know for me, being an essential worker, having to, be at work every day and my child being on Zoom, their education suffered a lot. Most adults don't have the capacity to, do online schooling, much less children who aren't experienced, with navigating technology for those long periods of time. So I think we're going to see the effect on both the children and the adults from the pandemic, that lapse in education.
I have kind of a follow up to that question, and my internet connection is a bit unstable. So forgive me if I'm a little robotic here. But with that being said, and this for the both of you, Mary or Miss Aminah, are there any advocacy opportunities or any calls to action that you guys could think of that some of our stakeholders and persons that take great interest in this topic and supporting students in prison, connecting them to basic needs and that financial support and assistance? Are there any things that we can do to kind of be more involved or support in greater ways?
I mean, for me, definitely more advocacy around banning the box, but also helping to offset the costs of tuition if the person is not able to get, fully funded by the state through Pell, um, or those avenues to be able to, have a pool of money where folks can afford to go to school and then also, afford like their basic needs, housing. Like um, housing is a must. It's like the foundation for any living being to have that security. So housing and, also meeting the needs of women who are the primary caregivers of children. Um, those would be, some of the things that I would like to see more support around.
Yeah, those are great. And I would just add that we need to really consider like abolition and really like dismantling these systems and
Absolutely.
co-creating something that, doesn't further harm folks. And, that also, provides food security, provides access to safe and affordable housing, that provides academic counseling, that provides, financial support, that provides a safe learning environment, which a prison does not, that are with fully resourced programs, updated curriculum and course options, access to ongoing academic support, and technological advances that folks on the inside just don't have access to and lag behind in. Also, the ability to cultivate meaningful connections, which is so important in the whole higher education atmosphere. Cultivating those in those connections and ongoing engagement and the feeling of like community connectedness. A lot of students don't feel connected to the community, and we know that being connected to the community, considerably increases folks' chances and success. So those are some things to think about when we are working towards advocating and creating something that is much better than what we have now in our carceral system.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And just to add on a little bit, that trauma specific rehabilitation and care is really key um, in implementing all of what you just said. Like, I know for me, the whole experience of prison was just trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. Um, so seeing that aspect and people really dig in and understand like what care and rehabilitation is, because these people are coming back into the community, and if you want them to contribute in a productive way, then healing needs to take place, humanization needs to take place.
Thank you, and that kind of leads me to my next question. And Ms. Aminah, you made a great point talking about just cultivating relationships and that connectivity that's needed for these students. And I actually was reading in a book. It's called The Education of Millionaires. So anyway, there's a chapter that specifically focuses on connections, and they term it connection capital. And so that just reminded me of what you just spoke of. And so if you could share with us a little bit of your experience specifically with the Berkeley Underground Scholars, because I think that in the work that you do there, that builds that connection capital for our students that are on campus and are able to, access programs like that. And if you are familiar with maybe other programs in other states that may be doing something similar that our students can connect with.
Yeah. I remember when I first got out of prison, someone told me, they were like, let your network be your net worth. Right. So then I go to the university and it's like and how they really lean into each other. They support each other. And that's the whole like kind of college, the atmosphere where connections are made and a lot of people are able to access doors that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to access. Well, so you underground scholars, does just that, right? And it networks with other UC staff, whether it's professors doing like research, if it's folks trying to get into public policy institutes, but USI helps to open doors for impacted individuals so that, they, for the future moving forward, we would have access to other doors. And another program that also does the same, it's in California, and it's Project Rebound. And they are through the California State Universities, also doing amazing work and still being able to, build the community connectedness so that, impacted leaders will have access. And then in turn, these programs turn around and have other impacted leaders in the organization that passes down to other folks. And that's how we keep the cycle going. But that is missing inside in prisons. There's no ability to make those connections because, especially in California, there's not a lot of in-person classes. It's really distance learning. And which is, I think in the other workshop, Kevin, my peer, spoke about asking a professor for feedback and not hearing anything. And that was the norm. That was norm for me. I went a whole semester sometimes and, never got a grade until it was the end of the semester. So being able to also have the interactions with professors, the support that helps to build individuals is crucial. Versus just remotely answering questions or bouncing them off your own head. We know we can't be our own thought partners, so that's something that we need and is missing.
Oh, thank you so much. And for me, it makes a bit of a correlation, if you will, to students being able to, access basic needs. It's about that connection that you have on campus and the network that you're able to tap into, to access those different resources. And so, Mary, would you like to share from your perspective, just some ways that you found that you've been able to access basic needs? And I know you talked a little bit about some of the challenges that you have faced, but in what ways have you been able to, overcome some of those challenges and work toward making that connection to those basic needs and financial assistance?
I think it was, the fact that for me, that I had a child and I didn't want my child to go through what I went through. So I kind of put my ego to the side and also just put all the reservations. Like I was desperate. So for me, and I'm always have been an outspoken person. So connecting with the welfare to work program that was on my campus, they added some support services where they provided a trans pass and a counselor we could talk to. So I was always very vocal about my needs because I knew that education was my passport out of the situation of poverty and having this criminal record that was hindering me from finding quality employment at a livable wage. So getting connected with those resources and also talking to my professors. And I think it was also, things aligned in a certain way at the time. When I was dealing with my housing insecurity at community college, I had been, volunteering, doing an internship, a practicum at a local community center. And one of the coworkers had asked me, I had shared this, my situation, and had asked me if I wanted to be in a film on housing insecurity. So then I was introduced to the Real College movement with Sarah Goldrick-Rab and created this documentary about my experience. And then that was the first opportunity where I saw that I could leverage my story to, bring a voice and a face to this epidemic that a lot of folks had already been facing and continue to face. So for me, it was always using my story to not only, propel myself forward, but also get eyes and ears on this issue. So that was kind of my strategy. And it's pretty much how I also approach my art and practice. It's all from a lived autobiographical lens. I don't know if that answered the question. Sorry.
No, that answered the question greatly, and thank you so much. And I do not want to ask all the questions, Mary. So if you have any additional questions, please jump in because I could talk about this topic forever. I think that it is very important to make sure that our impacted individuals that are being hosted on campuses or are in some type of prison to higher ed program, they have access to, you know, these types of programs and their basic needs and the financial assistance that they need to pursue their degrees and things of such. So I will pause my questions to see if you have any additional questions or anything
I
to add.
think, yeah, I have some thoughts. I know a lot of times programs will pop up and, they'll be above the minimum wage. And, sometimes, a lot of times these programs aren't permanent. And, you know, people's benefits are affected because the government thinks they're making a certain amount or have a certain amount. So I would like to see more nuance around creating programs that provide some financial assistance that don't affect their public welfare benefits, because it can be like this cycle where they're kicked off the benefits, they have to reapply, and those lapses can mean like life or death or someone committing a survival crime. I don't think those are some of the things that we think about.
That was really good insight. And Miss Amina, do you have anything to add to piggyback off of that or want to expound a bit more on that?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'll just add to that even while Mary was talking, I was thinking about how, access to fellowships, like for incarcerated scholars. I think that would be totally instrumental, and I think it's necessary because it helps to develop leaders, and that's something that I think when we're talking about equity as well, a lot of times you only see that on the campus, but it's definitely important as for folks' future. So thinking about how can we engage incarcerated scholars in fellowships, and also the production, like uplifting and motivating them to produce knowledge. And that means like engaging in maybe like research, participatory action research on their own social conditions, and to share with the larger community that help inform some policies. But how do we engage incarcerated scholars like we engage students on campus, to achieve their highest excellence?
Right. And that just made me think of something. In addition to fellowship, housing stipends, and creating housing maybe designated for formerly incarcerated or folks that are marginalized and just don't have access, so that they have the things that they need to be supported to be successful.
Oh, that was really good. Thank you both. And so we have about 5 minutes or so remaining. And so I definitely want to open up the floor for any closing remarks, anything. I know I feel like my questions took us down a bit of a rabbit hole, but if there are any things that, maybe you did not get to share yet or just some important takeaways for our audience to kind of go back and be able to share out with their colleagues and things like that.
I mean, the only thing comes to mind, like outside of like meeting housing need and school costs and supplies and books, food needs. So making sure that these campus cupboards are stocked and folks know how to access you know these things. But yeah, I think that's all I really had.
Yeah. And I'll just close with, just challenging folks to, try practicing some equity mindedness and, really it really describes the actions that demonstrate individuals' capacity to recognize and address racialized structures, i.e. the carceral system, policies, hyper-surveillance of bodies in prison, and practices like that we see today, including outdated curriculum that further harms individuals, and work on producing other more, caring and more healing centered programs and conditions for our Black and brown people that find themselves in the system.
Right. I totally agree. Until we address the structural underlinings of a lot of these systems that are founded in racism and white toxicity and supremacy, we will probably be having these conversations forever. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do.
Yes, well, I am absolutely elated that the conversations are happening here and that you guys are doing the work and bringing it back to us and having these moments to just share out in these spaces. I think that is very much needed. And we very much so appreciate you guys allowing us to host you today and pick your brains as such. I think that this has been definitely a robust conversation, and we hope to continue the conversations with you.
Absolutely. Likewise.